we were told that, oh, it's only 5 pages long, and it shouldn't take too long, and we did not believe that we had meeting. Yeah.
Good evening. I've got 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. Welcome. I'm Tim Hanley, the project manager for the State Truck Highway 29 and Wisconsin County U intersection project. And I just want to welcome you all to the meeting tonight. We've got a number of representatives from the department and from our consulting firm that's helping the department. I'm going to take a second just to introduce everybody. Mike Kretschmer is our supervisor. Tegan Griffith is our communications manager. Felix Ogles, project engineer. Ryan Yankee, project manager with HNTV, helping the department on this project. And Dan Bauman, project engineer with HNTV. So we expected a large crowd, so we brought a number of people out to help us and make sure we can talk to you and work with you one-on-one as needed after the meeting. We have a short presentation to share, and then we'll take some questions, and then we can adjourn to an open house format where we'll meet with you one-on-one, get your input. Tonight, our goal is to be here to listen, to hear what you have to say, gather your input as we can move forward with our project. So just a little bit about the area. Most of you are probably really familiar, but our project location here, County Truck Highway U, kind of in between Pella, Shawano, Gresham, Kashina, the Menominee Reservation, North Star Casino, Mohican Casino. We know this is in the Shawano School District. U is kind of an important north-south road between Pella and Gresham. This is an aerial photo of your project, the project location. This is the County Trunk Highway U intersection. These yellow lines dictate or indicate our right-of-way. Currently, what the highway right-of-way is in the area, what area we're working with. So this is the U corridor, and this is the 29 corridor. A few things we know about this area. The County Trunk Highway U traffic on the north is about 1,500 cars a day. County Trunk Highway U on the south, 380 cars a day. Highway 29 typically has around 9,100 cars a day. Highway 29 is also an important, what we call an oversized overweight route. It carries a lot of big freight. We also know Highway 29 is a designated wind tower corridor, so it's an important route. Why we're here today. In 2016, 2017, this location showed up as a site of interest, meaning that there were a lot of crashes occurring in this location, and the state said we should look into this. In 2017-18, a safety study was conducted, and they identified that there's a high right-angle crash trend going on at this intersection, and further followed up and asked to get this project funded with Highway Safety Improvement Program dollars. That's what funded this project. This project got funded. I work in our project development section. They assigned that project to me. That's kind of how we got here tonight, and we're just getting started in our design process. You may have seen our survey crew out a month ago out on the corridor gathering information and looking about the corridor. But because this was a safety thing, and there are some things that the department tried to do initially to improve safety, we reground some rumble strips on you. We had double signed the stop signs, flashing red on the stop signs. And we also on 29 installed a 55 mile per hour advisory. So we've taken some interim measures to try to help until we can get this project done. Tonight is kind of an early part of our design process where we're here to listen and learn from the public and consider that information moving forward. And we're on a relatively tight timeline with this project, hoping to be done by November of next year. So we'll be moving rapidly. The department contracted with HNTB to help us with the project, and Ryan's going to help me with the presentation. And actually, I'm going to hand off to him and let him take us through some of the preliminary engineering that we've started doing on the project.
Thanks, Tim. I'm Ryan. I'm with HNTB. We're helping the department deliver this project. And I just wanted to start out by talking about the purpose and need for this project, sort of why we're here, why this project exists. The purpose is really two-staged. It is to reduce and or eliminate severe crashes that have been occurring out there, and it's also to improve intersection operations. The need for this project relates back to the safety that Tim mentioned. It's been identified as a top crash location, right angle crash trend. So as we move forward through these next slides and some of the conceptual alternatives we have here, we always sort of look back to, will it address the purpose and need that originated this project? This slide shows an intersection conflict points diagram, and this is a generic slide that would be any crossroad such as County U and crossing a divided highway such as WIS 29. And what it's showing is all of the movements that an intersection like this would provide. So basically all the options. If we went through and we traced all the left turns, all the right turns, all the crossings, and we looked at every single spot that they interacted with each other, we would come up with the 42 total conflict points, which is inherent to this type of intersection at grade. So that's what's out there today. So 42 conflict points is basically 42 areas that a vehicle could crash into each other or crash into something. So operationally, one way to improve that would be to reduce the 42 conflict points to something less than that, which is what we'll get into later with some of the alternatives that are proposed tonight. Also operationally, I've talked to some local officials and even some people tonight. The way that these divided highway crossings operate is inconsistent. It may at times have some driver confusion. We'll see vehicles that are going to cross 29 on U try to sometimes do it a one-stage crossing, zoom across all lanes of 29 at one time, in which case they'd have to consider vehicles coming at both directions to safely make that. Other times, drivers might do this as a two-stage crossing, where they'll look at one direction, determine it to be safe, then they'll stop in the median and wait for vehicles to pass there as well. However, it's inconsistent, one, if they'll do it in one stage or two stages, and then also, if there's vehicles stopped here, how they interact with the potential left-turning vehicle coming off of 29. Sometimes that left-turning vehicle might cut in front of the stopped vehicle in the median. Other times they might go passenger door to passenger door, which is technically the correct way to make that option. However, it results in congestion or confusion sort of right in this median area and could be a contributing factor to some of the issues we've seen out there today with crash history. Another operational issue I've heard a couple times already at this location is what we're calling the shadow effect. It would be a vehicle driving west on 29 and say that vehicle is going to slow down and make the right-hand turn to go north. When there's another vehicle right next to it that sort of gets obscured from a person stopped at the intersection, and they think that there's a right-turning vehicle and they're good to cross, so they advance, and that vehicle in the inside lane sneaks up on them and there's an accident. I think that's happened out here a couple times. So relating this back to that purpose and need, we want to improve the operations of this intersection. This slide is a little bit more detailed of the 29U intersection in that it's a crash diagram. This looks at about a 6-year duration from 2011 to 17 at the crashes that occurred at this. And this is in your handout too if you want a more zoomed up view. But essentially there was a total of 15 crashes, and the type of crash was documented. Those crashes are all shown on this exhibit is where they occurred within the intersection and what type of crash it was, whether it be a rear end, a right angle, a left turn. But what's notable is that of the 15 crashes, 10 of them were right angle crashes, and those have historically been more severe type crashes compared to like a rear end type crash. So 10 out of the 15, 2/3 of them are this right angle crash. And these red boxes that we have drawn on this slide actually indicate the fatalities, the crashes that were fatalities in this study period, 11 to 17. And those were all 3 of them were right angle crashes. They happened in the westbound and the eastbound direction of West 29. And I will note that there is several more. This list here of 6 does say that there's a higher occurrence rate in the westbound direction. So we want to look at why is this happening. Some of it could be due to the operational issues that I mentioned that are inherent to this type of intersection. But there's also some existing conditions going on out here that I'm sure a lot of people are aware about. And notably what I want to speak to on this slide is the existing hill that is just east of the the U crossing along West 29. So this is a site distance diagram, intersection site distance, and what it's showing is what we would consider for drivers that are going to cross 29 driving on U. This blue vehicle represents someone stopped driving north, and the intersection site distance that we would like to see them have using modern day standards, if this intersection were reconstructed and using modern day standards, is all the way down here on the right hand side of the slide by this other blue car. So that's quite a ways down. So if you're stopped, we want you to see that far. It's over 1,800 feet to the right, and that would allow you to have enough time to identify that, if you have enough time to cross or not, do it safely. Same thing driving south, that's the red. If you're looking to the left, again, we'd like you to, the modern standards dictate that that red vehicle represents how far away that should be. Okay, well, the actual condition is represented by this green vehicle here, which you can see is much closer than the desirable standards dictate. So there's a sight distance issue. It's largely driven by a crest curve that exists right along this area, like I mentioned, and it's obstructing the view of people crossing West 29 on U to make a decision safely that a vehicle won't strike them. So not only are we going to consider the vehicles along U crossing West 29, this slide represents the vehicles driving on West 29 themselves approaching the U intersection. Again, the blue vehicle would be a desirable decision sight distance that we would like to see from the intersection using modern standards. That would allow that driver enough time to see, hey, there's a car crossing in front of me, I can slow down, I can adjust course, and I can avoid hitting it. The red vehicle here is for stopping sight distance. That would essentially be the bare minimum that the standards currently dictate to, you see the vehicle crossing, slam on the brakes, your car comes to a halt before you would strike the vehicle. And the green again represents the actual. So in this case too, it is short of what the stopping sight distance and decision sight distance currently say would come out using modern standards. So not only is there an operational issue, there's also this existing sight distance issue. So moving forward with this, what are some conceptual, reasonable alternatives that this HISSUP application grant that Tim mentioned could construct to help meet the project's purpose and need? There's 4 of them that I'll show here, and these are on boards in the back. And they're conceptual, they're templates overlaid on the existing aerial. They would be further refined and engineered to fit the situation if one of them moves forward. But today they do convey what the intent is and what the concept is. So this first one is a J-turn intersection, and for the existing type intersection, and it cuts those down to about 24 or so almost in half. And it accomplishes this by not allowing the through movement on U directly across West 29. If a vehicle driving north that would want to cross West 29 would actually make a right-hand turn, so they would only have to consider one direction of traffic on West 29 at a time. So they'd make the right-hand turn, considering the eastbound traffic. They would be in a separate left turn lane potentially where a U-turn would occur, and then they would come back and make a right turn again. So they would only consider the westbound direction of 29 when they were doing that maneuver. So it splits up the crossing. It reduces what the driver has to consider for onbound West 29 traffic, but it also pushes the crossing point farther to the east, where that crest curve that I was talking about that's obstructing the site. Well, these vehicles would be potentially higher up on that hill, so oncoming traffic, they could see that, and oncoming vehicles could see them. So it's helping operationally reduce the conflict points. It's helping sight distance push that crossing maneuver farther to the east. It's symmetrical, so a vehicle driving south on you would basically follow the same procedure in the opposite direction. That is one alternative. Another alternative that is back there on the boards is the median U intersection. This is similar, but it does not provide for, let me go back. A vehicle on West 29 that wanted to go south or north on you would have a left turn median opening here that they could make that sort of similar how it is today. There's a left turn lane off of West 29 to go north or south on you. I needed to note that because this U intersection alternative median U does not provide that. This consolidates all of the through and the left movements to these U-turn locations, which again would reduce the conflict points, allow drivers to focus on one direction of traffic at a time along West 29, and also push this sight distance farther to the east, further up that crest curve so that it's more visible for crossing traffic. This is another alternative. This alternative was born from the local officials meeting, some feedback we got. This is the West 29 median widening. What this essentially does is does just that. It widens the existing median from what's out there today to be about 120 feet wide in this conceptual layout. That distance would be in between the traveled lanes of 29, and that should allow for a design vehicle such as a truck, farm vehicle, logging truck we've heard of has been out here, that they could cross one direction of 29, stop in the middle for the refuge, and then focus on the next direction of 29 before crossing that. So it breaks up the crossing from potentially one stage to two stages. Other than that, it does not necessarily change the operations from what's out there today versus a traditional at-grade intersection like this. This alternative, just because that widening would have to occur, does result in a longer east-west reconstruction along West 29. It also potentially needs some right-of-way. That blue line there is potential right-of-way. To fit this wide median in, there would potentially be some right-of-way taken along the north side, which is shown on here in blue. So this, again, helps improve operations by breaking up the crossing. Also helps with the sight distance if this was reconstructed, that hill crest could be brought down. The fourth alternative is called the westbound West 29 reconstruction, and it does not necessarily change the intersection configuration from how it is out there today. What it simply does is reconstruct the westbound hill to be lower and allow for that sight distance to occur. So vehicles stopped at you could get adequate sight distance of oncoming vehicles on West 29. So it would be a profile, the hill would get cut down to adequate crest curve to allow for that sight distance to happen. So those are the four alternatives that are on the table right now. They're conceptual, they need to be advanced and engineered further to make it right for the situation, but that is what is reasonable and feasible at the moment. This schedule on next steps. So we've already come past this point. November 19th, we had a local officials meeting here. We'll be presenting similar information and got feedback from local officials. We're at the public involvement meeting number 1 right now, where Tim mentioned we're looking to get your feedback. And moving forward, there's going to be another round. Local official meeting number 2 and PIM, public information meeting number 2, will happen in February and March, tentatively. After that, we would at these meetings, we'll have a preferred alternative. So instead of 4 boards presented back there today, 4 alternatives, by this time we hope to have it narrowed down to 1 and have some engineering further along to show what the real impacts are and present that to everybody. The environmental document process would take place by April. The design plans, the construction plans would be completed by November, and this is currently scheduled for construction in 2021, that season. For more information after this, the project will have a website. This is also in the handout for how to access this, but wisconsindot.gov, there is the project development section here. Click on North Central Region, and you will see the West 29 County U intersection. That'll have similar content to as what we presented here today on it for future reference. And like we said, we'll take questions now, and after this we'll follow with the open house format. We'll stand back by the boards and talk one-on-one with anybody.
Currently, at this intersection or similar intersections, do you ever put a stop sign in the median before you cross the second set of lanes to suggest to people that better stop in the middle and look?
Typically, operationally, we wouldn't unless the median was wider. And so the wider median alternative would have that thing, but in the narrower medians and typically in the expressway designs, that's not included. Ideally, those medians are designed to be a single stage maneuver where you sit on the side road, make your maneuver, and go through and don't stop. We recognize that at times people do use them as a two-stage where they pull out, do it half at a time. But that can cause, as the volumes increase and the turning movements increase, that can cause some confusion. We've had similar projects where people, the right way to make that left-hand turn is passenger door to passenger door. You've seen some cars will drive past somebody and kind of square themselves up. You see a lot of different things, but the legal way to do it is passenger door to passenger door when you're making a left-hand turn. Your passenger door should be next to the other cars. And some of you may have seen that out at this intersection where people are, see this gentleman over here is nodding his head. So that's something just as a, you know, how it should be driven, but that leads to some of the confusion. As the volumes go up, a couple of people making those maneuvers kind of can, I've seen 3 or 4 cars parked in the median trying to, you know, somebody's trying to make one left, someone's trying to make another left, and then there's the person in the middle who's trying to do something. So sometimes as volumes increase, that becomes a concern on how to manage it.
There are no lane stripes in that median.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Are you sure that there was only 3 people killed at that intersection? I thought there was more than that.
That was just within that study period. There was probably more outside of those dates, yeah.
Sure. You know
You went back 5 years.
Yeah,
Both the site-
6 years actually.
Yeah, so I think that's,
Why don't you put the numbers up there?
okay, so there was,
There is more than 3 that were killed.
The numbers?
Well, typically for a study, we would look at 5 or 6 years as what we routinely do. And I believe that's what that crash diagram had on
6
it.
years of study, yeah.
Now with your J-turn, have you considered the hill on the west or the west? When you come in with your J-turn, now you're gonna have to look uphill to
Right.
turn into traffic. Are you gonna have that ability to see that far when you come, we call it Tim's Hill?
Yeah, that got brought up at the local official meeting as well, that
Because that's not
maneuver
gonna give
getting,
you enough turn. I mean, we own a dairy farm and we have property on both sides.
Mhm.
There's no way we're gonna be able to come up the hill with the full wagon and turn into traffic and come around.
Yeah, we would, you know, these are conceptual and the details would need to be worked out. And sight distance you've identified is really one of the key things. So before we go forward and make any proposal, we will evaluate that sight distance and know whether it's adequate or better than desirable. We don't want to create another problem, is what I'm
I was gonna
saying.
say, and
So-
even up when you come east, you're gonna have the swamp where it comes down and you're gonna have that dip in there and you're not really gonna see that either.
Yeah, so sight distance will be something that will have to be looked at really closely going forward. Like I said, we're very early in our design of this. I know that you folks probably have been dealing with this intersection for a long time. But we're kind of just getting started, and one of our early steps is to come out, hear from the public, consider your input, and make sure we're not missing anything. Who uses the intersection, the type of use.
There's a lot of summers, a lot of agriculture. I mean, right now, you only take 2 implements across because there's no way you can take 3. I mean, if you do, you better go.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta find a really big gap. Yeah.
Along those lines, on the J-turn, at our first meeting that we had, we brought up, if you remember, and it's quite an issue for the farmers, somebody with a tractor and 2 gravity boxes are going to turn right, and he's got to make the circle to go back to the west, and we thought that would not be a good idea, or a semi full of corn or beans. And the main consensus at that meeting was to widen it, take the hill down to the east and the west.
The, what I did talk about at that is, that did come up, and I had mentioned that was an issue at a previous intersection that I had worked on with grain trucks and at the Highway 54 in U. And a number of people had asked questions, and that's what's on those two boards right behind you. There's an example of the J-turn at VV, and then there's right next to it an example of the one that we did in Wisconsin Rapids when we had a similar issue where we started out with an idea of doing what was on the left panel, and then we had input from the public and the farmers that there was a large grain facility and a lot of grain trucks going, and they expressed the concerns about having to make a weaving maneuver and crossing two lanes in high-speed traffic. And that's where we came up with a hybrid solution where we kind of designed something different, where we provided a median lane so the drivers only had to make a quick right cross and they were in their own median lane. So that's what I explained at the local officials meeting. We did have a gentleman ask us to look at or consider a widened median, and we did come back with that. But we haven't made any decisions on anything yet. We're here to share information. So if you have questions afterwards, I'd be happy to stand and talk with you at that, and, explain a little what we did on that project. But as Ryan said, every project is unique, and we're going to do the right thing and make sure we have all the right sight distances at whatever we implement.
So you guys gotta speak up and tell them what you want.
Why, this is the interchange on here. When I went to these meetings 15, 20 years ago with the frontage roads and that, he says, we can't do it now because the money ain't there. I said, well, when will the money be there?
Yeah.
He says, when a school bus load of kids get here. That's what the guy from the DOT told me. I mean, that's what we're waiting for today.
No, that
Before
would,
this gets to be an interchange,
Yeah.
it's supposed to already be.
that would
done.
not be my answer.
Well, it was then, and
and
then that's about it. Somebody
and I
here
can't-
earlier said that's what happened someplace else.
Well, what
The
I-
school bus got hit.
I believe they already got it all planned out for an interchange.
They do.
There-
I've seen it all.
There were preliminary studies
Yeah.
regarding a freeway
And
conversion,
it keeps put-
but
pushed back,
that's a
pushed
very
back.
expensive thing to do, and
So
the
you're throwing
traffic.
good money after bad.
Not really.
Sure you are.
Generally,
You're
it's,
sticking money into this, you ain't doing it for nothing.
no, we would spend some cost, but it's
Right.
kind of like in a farming example. If you can get by with a 50 horsepower tractor, you don't go buy a 200 horsepower tractor to meet a future need. You buy what you need, and if you're growing, you do it. And the department looks at interchanges the same way. The traffic volumes have to increase significantly. We have to get a much larger volume of traffic or a demand for that type of facility. So to be responsible, we have to look at something that's intermediate and working way up instead of going right to the maximum. No one would go, you would be angry with us if we just went to the maximum on every time there's a problem. That wouldn't be a good,
This was set up years ago already. I
Well, it was
went to all
a
these
study.
meetings. This is nothing new.
it was a study, yes, sir,
Yeah.
you're correct.
And I was also, I don't know if this is true, that the J-turn by Maplewood Meats is coming out, they're putting an overpass there.
That is true, but the reason they're doing that is because Brown County solicited for a development, and Brown County is putting a number of $1 million into the project, along with, I'm forgetting what I'm saying, pardon? So there's a group, so that's based on development, not based on a safety need or based on a problem. That's based on a development where there's planned growth, and both Brown County and a developer are putting money into making that improvement.
Besides, people don't use the J-turn right there anyway. They just pull right out into traffic.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to that. I mean, I know about it, but I don't live in
I've
Green
never
Bay.
seen anybody do it right.
They don't.
And I live on Annapolis Road, and if it's bad enough going to and from work the way it is, now just makes it worse. J-turns, when people, you're just pulling out in front of oncoming traffic either way.
Okay, that's your concern, that people would yield or act.
They don't use them.
They don't, in my experience, they don't yield when you're big, so why are they yield here?
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess legally they're supposed to yield, and that's,
Well, yeah, well, if
If you're
legally,
crossing
they're
the
more
fast lane to use the J-turn.
Legally, we're supposed to yield over here too, though. It says.
Yeah.
But I mean, you gotta cross the fast lane to get in for your J-turn. You gotta cross both lanes.
Yeah,
And then when you come back out, you're crossing both lanes again. For now, you can at least pull out into the slow lane if you're turning right.
you cross both lanes, but you simplify. If you looked at the normal, the standard J-turn, if I call it, that has a pull out into the right lane, which is the fast lane, weave across, then weave into a U-turn lane, and then make a U-turn. One of the options that I talked about at the local officials meeting was something like that hybrid, where you just cross two lanes. So you simplify all the movements for the drivers, and so you cross two lanes and you get into a median lane that's your own independent lane, and you can go as slow as you need to or as fast as you need to the U-turn location. Then your movement again is simplified because you're only crossing two lanes, and either you can go into the right turn lane, which takes you, if you want to continue north, or you can turn into when there's an adequate gap, you can turn in and then signal over into the normal slower driving lane. So there are some subtle differences that we would certainly be aware of.
Can I ask a really weird question? Have
Sure.
any of you guys driven big equipment? Okay. Because, I mean, honestly, I don't
Well, I
know
grew
your
up on a
background.
farm, but I
Yeah,
was
I don't
more
know
in the
your
50
background.
horsepower farm tractors than the 200 horsepower farm tractors. So-
Because sometimes when you do these intersection changes, I mean, my sister lives by 41 on E, where you got the J turn on E, where you come off 41, you're spinning around and turning onto E by Abrams. And we tried to do hay wagons coming through that intersection. That's crazy. I mean, so if you try to do it here, even with our equipment, and you have to spin out and come around, and you're supposed to use it like you're saying, okay, well now I'm crossing, coming up over a hill, and I'm coming back in at 65.
Whatever we would propose, we will do a turning movement check on, and we will use a variety of vehicles. And if farming equipment is using this, we would check it to make sure. If semis are using it, we would check it to make sure the turning movements can be made. Again, we don't want to build something that doesn't work. So we would investigate all of those turning movements and make sure that what we propose works.
One other thing that take into consideration with the U-turn or whatever, if you're coming south with any loaded wagons, if you're gonna force them to go up that hill, you're gonna be putting more tractors on the road than trucks. With a pickup pulling, chopper wagon is gonna hell of a time pulling that hill.
Well, that's where, if we did propose the hybrid solution, you would be in your own lane, not mixed in with the
Right,
high-speed
but
traffic.
you're gonna have to be putting more tractors on the road. Not necessarily to picking up speed, but,
Just to pull it uphill,
yeah.
because you're gonna have the weight behind you pulling you backwards, not you can pull up.
So you
Even
can put
with
more
wood.
tractors on the road.
Even with the lumber company up the road, you're not gonna be able to do it.
Okay, well, I didn't know there was a lumber company up the road.
You
How
got
far
Tilda,
up? Pardon?
the lumber mill, right off the Winkle, and you go towards Tilda.
Okay.
They come by our house all the time with the lumber.
Well, that's good to know. That's why we do these public involvement meetings, to hear from the locals.
You're not gonna be able to turn with all that wood. The chipper mill, that's what I'm trying to say.
Does anyone else have any questions, or we can adjourn to an open house format? That apartment's going to be here till 7:30, or until anybody's questions are answered. We'll be here until we need to, as long as we need to be. Yes,
I
sir.
was just wondering, would you, overall say that, Burgess would be the best, would be the ideal situation?
Are you saying if money is no object, if money had no meaning? Is that what you're asking? If
Yeah.
money had no meaning? Well, I mean, every intersection, if you had an at-grade intersection at any intersections, if money was no object, you could have those everywhere, but that's not something that's,
Well, this is different with the amount of people that are getting killed or not.
well, that's why we're here, is to talk about what is possible, yes.
Do you have the price on each one of these? I know I've seen it in one of the articles. Do you have the price on each one? Because I know we were approved at one time when we were doing this other study. We were approved for 2.5 million or
I believe
whatever.
that's the estimate that we have for doing the HISP grant. So for our purposes, we have to pick something to say, hey, what would we need to fund? and they felt that that would be a possible solution and maybe a reasonable cost. So they used that to develop a cost estimate to get the project approved. But then it goes back to our design process where we start and start from the square one, where everything, or these alternatives are, kind of in our framework of looking at as an intermediate solution to try to address the purpose and need, the operations and the safety concerns that the public has raised and the department has raised in our own evaluation of it. So that's where that 2.5 number came from, and that will have to be rechecked and calculated. And we will develop cost estimates on these as we go forward. We don't have that today, do we, Ryan?
No, the 2.5 is approximate.
One was used as a, hey, we need to get a project funded, how do we get started? Basically, it gets us a budget to start with.
So the feedback that I got from the public that I'm affiliated with was option basically number 4 and number 3. The folks that I talked to do not want the J-turn. They're not familiar with the median U-turn and probably would not favor that. So the folks that I've talked to, they would rather it stay mostly the same. They want the hill taken out. They want the shadowing effect taken away with a better, wider turnoff. And the point that I think everybody needs to be aware of is the DOT and why everybody's doing this is to reduce fatals. We want to reduce fatal crashes, right? And that's why they're proposing the J-turn. So don't hate them for that, because even the J-turn at Maplewood Meets was implemented to reduce fatals, right? And it did its job. It does not reduce crashes though. Crashes remain the same, but it did remain, fatals were 0 for the last, how many years it was implemented. So that's an important thing to remember. If we leave this the same the way it is, and which I'm proposing and which I hope they do also, it doesn't take away the right angle crash that kills people. So that's what you gotta keep in mind. So we'll still have fatals if there's a crash, but there's no excuse. Right now there's an excuse. There's a hill obstructing view. And that's what we want to take away. We want to take away that excuse. We want to take away that shadow effect, because we know that folks making a left-hand turn can't see, or they're not patient enough, and they just pull out because there's a person making a right-hand turn and they just can't see further down the road. So we want to take away those obstructions and those reasons why folks are getting in crashes, but we may not, if someone does make a mistake, there still may be a fatal, where a J-turn has been proven to take away those fatals because it's a glancing blow. So when you guys decide and when you give input from the DOT, just keep that in mind, okay?
Because that's definitely one of our concerns is, as we talked about, there's a high number of right-angle crashes here,
Right.
which are those high-severity crashes, and that's one of the things we're really trying to do is figure out how can we eliminate that.
Right.
Okay, so I have another question. You guys say a lot about the Maplewood one. Okay, how many actual farmers or wood trucks or semis go on those or find alternative routes? Because I know they redid 3 other roads so that the farmers could go down 3 other roads.
So that's in
So
the
there's a
northeast
ripple
region.
effect.
I mean, I can't speak directly to all of those comments because I'm aware of it, but I don't live in the northeast region or work in there. So, but we could ask the
I mean,
northeast
because
region for
now
some
we're
input.
thinking about, okay, so now we take out that effect, and now you got, I cannot think of the farm name, I'm sorry, on the north side, and they said too, they actually literally had the township put in a whole nother road so that they can go down the road 2 miles and take south and cross at a different intersection. There's no, sorry, but there's no way we can do that here. I mean, Lapis Road has a weight restriction. Now you're telling me to go all the way down A, basically, and coming around when there's a weight restriction so I can get to my land on the other side.
Well, we would not be
But I'm just saying,
proposing that. Yeah.
I mean, because that's what happened there too as well. They just decided to put in a whole other way of alternative route to get to their land.
Yeah, that's definitely not gonna be an option here with the money.
Right.
You know, Brown County has a different tax and, a lot more money to spend, so that's what they do. And we definitely have a lot more agricultural, so that's why I'm pushing, and that's why we need to tell him.
I don't want the
we
J
want-
turn
we
at all,
want-
or the U turn.
We want number 3 or number 4, I think, but I don't know how number 3 is gonna impact property owners. Obviously, they said it
Well,
would take
yeah,
more
that's-
right away. So
Which one was 3, which one was 4?
Four is wide and medium, and four, oh yeah, lower the hill. That's-
The reason we brought up the widening of the median is I've heard from bus drivers, loggers, one of our fatals was an agricultural vehicle trying to cross both lanes at the same time. Because obviously buses, loggers, and farm implements do not feel safe in that they feel like they're going to get clipped in the back or in the front. So they'll wait for a gap. Obviously, there's an obstruction to the right. That agricultural implement tried to cross, and I just didn't see it. It was in the dip, And as he went, someone came and got hit and got killed. So that's why we asked for a widening. I don't know how big of an impact that's going to be on the house there and property owners and how folks are going to care about that. But I'm sure that's going to have an impact. But I think it would be a good idea to have a stop. I mean, everybody should be stopping and not trying to cross both 4 lanes at one time, So you guys got to let these folks know 3 and 4 is what we want.
Can you
But
do
then-
3 and 4 together?
I was gonna say, can you lower the hill and put the wheels right in it? I mean, you're spending money, why don't you do it right?
Number 3 does that. Number 3 takes care of the hill, widens the median, and gives a better exit for folks traveling north on U. So 3 does that. 4 does that also. It levels the hill. It does not give a widening of the median. 4 doesn't widen the median. It just takes care of the hill, which is a big problem, and it takes away that shadow effect from what I saw in the thing. So 4 is a good option. Now 3 is a little bit better because you can stop, there's a wider median for farm implements, buses, loggers, people with wider loads. So
But I think the important thing the sheriff said is angle crashes are the severe crash, and that's the crash that we're really, in your handout that we show, and that's what we're most interested in trying to solve that problem, is the angle crash.
We're gonna happen if you're going uphill with the foot. You're slowing down. I mean, people don't slow down when we turn into fields now. I mean, no offense.
Well, human factors are something real, and we can do the best we can do to try to engineer something, but then, I kind of look at engineering in like 4 phases. There's engineering, enforcement, education, maybe encouragement. Encouraging people to be, good drivers and good partners and good neighbors. But all of those things have to work correctly together. And if they don't, if you don't do any enforcement, we can engineer the daylights out of something and it won't work. And if we don't do good in engineering, then enforcement can't solve that problem. So we have to work hand in hand to try to come up with a good solution that meets our purpose and need.
Is there like a rule where you guys can't work on the south side of widening it into the median there? Or where you can't, so you're not taking out Wegmans?
We are,
Bring in?
what we have is there's a church and a cemetery and.
No, I meant like into the actual grass strip area.
Well,
Is there a rule on how far that has to be? I'm sorry.
No, there's not a rule, but there's a goal, and that would be counter with what the sheriff was talking about, one of the options to widen the median. So we're trying to balance all of those things and get to something that goes back to what we put in your crash diagram in your handout is these angle crashes we know are the most severe and the most problematic at these locations. So our goal is to come up with a solution for that problem.
Do you have an estimated difference in time it takes to cross with a car or with a three-vehicle agricultural train that goes 20 at the most?
I recognize there is different startup profiles. I don't have a number for you that I can tell you, but I know a car. I've talked with semi-drivers, and a lot of the semi-drivers tell me they now have automatic transmissions in their rigs. And so even the old guy that used to be able to really shift it and make things happen and rev it up, that they have just a set startup profile. I'm not a semi-driver, but that's what I've been told on other projects. So That's a lot longer. I would want to say that's 9 to 12 to 15 seconds maybe to get up to speed. Okay, so there's a big range in differences between a car, a tractor, and a semi.
You have the speed, you're looking at that second to 10 minutes.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
There's also a lot of campers that they people going to travel trailers.
North and south on you, is that?
Yeah, or 29, but then, going back home, you have to stay back on the road.
Yeah, most of them are headed north, coming from the north.
Okay.
You get the Pine Hills and all that.
Okay.
You also have all the trail rides for myself.
Well, if there aren't any other general questions, we're going to be here at least till 7:30 or until anybody gets, everyone gets their questions answered. So with that, I guess I just thank you all for coming out on a cold night and to hear and to learn about this project, and that you could share input with us. We appreciate that. I also want to thank the town for their hospitality to provide us this nice meeting space and warm. Thank you, town of Herman, for doing that. And again, like I said, we'll be here and we'll answer your questions and take your comments. Oh, one other thing, on the back of your handout, there is a comment form. Have you